Come, spellweavers, reavers, rogues, and men-at-arms, and answer the call of adventure. Pick up your sword, your axe, your spellbook, your bow, your rulebook, and your dice, and join the forces of good in their eternal fight against vile monsters, conspiring min-maxers, horny bards, and blood-soaked murder hobos. Discover the treasure trove of role-playing games here on Rollin Bones. My name is Ryan Howard, and I shall be your guide. Good evening, Boneheads, and welcome back to Rollin Bones with Ryan Howard, where we are making old school young again. I'm your host and king of the Boneheads, Ryan Howard, and tonight it is just going to be me. I am flying solo for the first time in a couple weeks, and I am going to be talking all about the things that I feel are essential, the essential core components that every RPG rule set has to address. So, this is something I'm thinking a lot about now that I'm basically fully working on Project Skeleton, in addition to other things that I'm working on. But this is something that I've been giving a lot of thought to over the past couple weeks, and I really wanted to talk about not only what are the essential pieces, but why I think they're essential, and then how I am currently looking to address them. So we're going to be doing that here this evening. Before we begin, just want to remind everyone to like, share, and subscribe. That's how you let people know what we have going on over here. I was trying to make it a reality tonight. It didn't actually end up working out. I need to go back to the drawing board and figure out what to do. But I'm also trying to get the show live on Rumble. I'm pretty much going to abandon Twitch because no one cares about Twitch anymore, especially for like this kind of content. So I'll need to figure that out, but that'll be coming. So sometime in the next couple weeks, we'll figure out how to get this thing on Rumble live. So you'll have that to look forward to. Also want to remind everyone that you can find me on various social media platforms, including X and Instagram, where I am currently live on X at Howard_Ryan Gregg. YouTube is Rollin Bones. Twitch, even though I'm abandoning it, is twitch.tv/RollingBonesRyan. And then Substack is rollinbones.substack.com. Good news on the Substack front. My Dueling Part 2 article about melee duels is going live tomorrow at 9 a.m. So you guys have that to look forward to. That is 9 a.m. Central Time for anyone keeping track. So you'll have that to look at and enjoy. Hopefully you guys do enjoy it. It has a lot of pieces that connect together for the ideas that I'm going to be talking about tonight. There's a lot of those ideas are germinating in that article, and that's part of why it took me so long to get that out. That and working on 3 different projects right now. So there's that. Anyway, let's go ahead and dig into tonight's topic. First and foremost, I don't know why I feel the need to address this. Most of you probably didn't notice, but now that I'm holding this up here, normally on the show, I'm drinking Blade and Bow bourbon, because why would I not drink something called Blade and Bow on an RPG stream? But tonight, I was out of my bourbon, and so I made myself a margarita. And this is a special margarita because I put cayenne pepper in it, and I gotta say, it kicks ass. Cayenne pepper in a margarita. Who'd have thunk it? Probably a million bartenders already, but that's a good margarita, if I do say so myself. And looks like we got some cool people in chat here tonight. Rex Teal, loyal follower as always. Welcome, man. I'm glad that you're here. Malachi is here as well. What is up? I'm glad that you're here. And Black Lodge Games. I'm glad that you guys could make it tonight. By the way, speaking of Black Lodge Games, 48 hours, now probably down to 36 hours left on the Shut Doorster Kickstarter. So if you guys want to get on that, your time window is narrowing. Um, the sands of time are sinking, as the old hymn would say. So if you want to get in on that shucked oyster action, which is just as dirty as it sounds, you have a increasingly slim window of time to do so. So I encourage all of you who have not backed already, do so. And Black Lodge Games also points out a slice of jalapeno in your glass is definitely a good addition. I've done that before. I've also just like dropped some jalapeno in the tequila and let it sit for a little bit, just kind of let it infuse. I've not done that overnight. That'll probably be the next step of my spicy margarita evolution. But yeah, margaritas are fantastic. It's an amazing drink. It really is like something special. And yes, $30,000 is the current goal. I believe this is like the last stretch goal, maybe one other left in the tank. But in those the last day or the last day and a half of shucked oyster, let's get him over that threshold. Yep, I have a food processor, so I can blend them into a paste. Yeah, so this is going to turn into just the margarita talk, and you know what? I'm fine with it. Uh, as Malachi said, I found my lost shaker of salt. So yeah. Although speaking of shakers of salt, uh, I'm actually a little worried about tonight because apparently I'm going directly head to head with the Sultan of Salt, Griff himself, over on Dundermoose's channel. Which, if you guys haven't been keeping up with what's been going on that front, oh god, oh god. Okay, did you know that if you call your game a Bronstein, you are stealing directly from David Wesley? I didn't know that. Hell, I don't think David Wesley knows that, but apparently you're a thief. Congratulations, you you thieving bastard. But yeah, that's all I'll say about that. Let's dig into the topic at hand here, because there's a lot to discuss. When you take a look at the name RPG, obviously you have what that acronym stands for: role-playing game. So to begin this conversation, you want to break down role-playing and game. Let's start with game, because that's the older concept. That's the one that goes all the way back. Although role-playing is also extremely old, but a game. What's a game? And already, there are some of you out there who this is going to make extremely upset, because there are some people who still hold to this GNS theory nonsense that's about 25 years past its prime. A game is a simulation. That's right. A game is a simulation in and of itself. You are setting artificial parameters in which you are going to operate. And Malachi, I know it's not going to trigger you or Rex or Black Lodge Games, but there may be people who stumble upon this show who think that simulation is evil somehow, because those people are, they're still out there. You encounter them on Twitter all the time. It's horrible. But a game is a simulation in and of itself. Simulation. Yeah. As Tag 1080 here is saying, a set of voluntary limitations to solve a simulated problem. Yeah. Basically. You are limiting your action in pursuit of a singular goal, and you have to operate within those limitations in order to, interface with the game. It's a game. Like, it is a simulation. You set parameters and everything. Now, what is it a simulation of? In general, warfare. The concept of a game is inherently a violent concept, and that's something else that might upset some delicate sensibilities out there. The reason that human beings play games, or at least the reason why we did play games, was to prepare ourselves for the tactical aspects, and in some cases the physical aspects, of war. That's where tabletop games come from. The tabletop game is a direct descendant of the free Kriegspiel, which was a war game. It was a military tactical simulation. And the reason why games continue to be popular with so many people, the reason why sports are popular, it's simulated warfare. So, yeah, that's kind of what we're dealing with within the concept of game. Even the most non-violent, dare I say, hug box game has some element of competition in it, or at least some element of people working together for a common goal. No, I'm not even going to qualify that. It has an element of competition in it, whether that competition is against the other players or something kind of built into the game itself, or both. Because some games, the conflict changes in the middle. So, there is an element of conflict inherent in this concept of games. And Rex Teal makes a good point here in chat already. Would a simulation inherently get you into the role-play mindset? Yes. Yes. And this is important. Because it's a simulation, you have to accept the parameters as they're given. Otherwise, you're not playing the game. In accepting the parameters, you are already playing a role. So let's get abstract with this, and let's talk about football for a second. When you accept the parameters that you have 4 downs to get the ball 10 yards, and then you get another 4 downs until you get to the end zone. Already, roles begin to come like naturally. You have to move the ball. So there's going to be people on the other side who have to stop the ball from moving. You want to protect the people who are carrying the ball. So you inherently have this kind of class that breaks out of ball carriers and ball protectors. Just when you accept the parameters of the game, already the role of running back, defensive linebackers, basically, defensive linemen, and offensive linemen come in. You have to have someone to get the ball from the starting point to the ball carrier. That's your center. It's helpful to have someone orchestrating the entire strategy, kind of, acting as a captain, a marshal, a general of the play, especially on the offensive side, not so much on the defensive side. The defense has one unified goal, and that is stop the ball from moving. The offense has multiple goals, mainly either protect the ball carrier or carry the ball if you are the ball carrier. So it's helpful to have someone orchestrating all those roles in kind of a martial perspective, and that's what a quarterback is. So, again, to bring Rex's comment up here for everyone to see, a simulation inherently gets you into the roleplay mindset, because then you have to start considering, what is my function within these parameters? What do I do? When the game is simple, the roles are simple. When the game gets more complicated, the roles get more complicated. So this gets into the first element of role-playing games that is essential, and that's character. Because a role-playing game has roles that need to be played, you have to have those roles fleshed out. So how do games generally go about doing this? there tend to be two schools of thought, as you all probably already know. I've not really gotten into anything that isn't kind of plainly obvious to anyone who's been in this hobby for a long time. Skills and classes, as Malachi is saying here in chat. Skills and classes. Skills are you individually are, picking individual skills to kind of build a loadout for your character. This is what my character can do. Here are the individual skills that my character has, and I will apply them in various places. Classes roll character or roll skills into bundles and say, if you pick this bundle, you are inherently going to have these skills. So if you pick the warrior bundle, you are going to know military tactics, you are going to have a broad mastery of weapons, and you are going to be able to fight really well. You're going to have a lot of hit points, that kind of stuff. As Malachi also points out here, Palladium kind of does both. And honestly, even though I'm not the biggest fan of Palladium, and before the Palladium people come in, I'm not the biggest fan of Palladium because I'm not very well read in Palladium. I have not had much of a chance to play it. I've got Palladium Fantasy 2nd Edition on my shelf over here. That was very kindly given to me by Orcus Dorcas when he and Crafty Matt and I met up several months ago. That's the only Palladium book I've ever read. I have not read Rifts. I've not read Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and I haven't played anything. So that's my setting up the barriers for the Palladium people. Don't charge me all at once. I'm just not very well versed in your game. But yes, like Malachi said, it has elements of both. And this is kind of what I'm leaning into with Project Skeleton, as I'm currently calling my role-playing game. My idea is that a character is a fusion of natural affinities, natural abilities, and skills that they pick up over a period of time. So rather than having stats, there is a stat system for me. But instead of using stat scores, I'm using dice pools right now, at least. 8d6 over 4 categories of affinities that players have. And affinities is not actually the name that I set aside for them. I have a different one. For some reason, I can't remember it. And maybe that's telling me that it's a bad name, but let me pull up this document here just so I'm not... Aptitudes. That's what it is. These are aptitudes. So these are, things that you're born with. And so in Project Skeleton, you've got your physical, mental, spiritual, and personal aptitudes. Under physical, you have things like strength, which is, how hard you hit, how much you can lift, athleticism, hand-eye coordination, which is your shooting and lock picking and pickpocketing, basically like shooting and thief skills. And then vigor is the 4th physical thing, which is your resistance to poison, your ability to overcome fatigue, how many wounds you can take. And then you go to mental. That is knowledge, which, you guys know knowledge, how much information you can hold in your head, knowing a tomato is a fruit, instinct, ingenuity, and willpower. Although I think willpower might actually end up going into spiritual, but we'll see about that. Spiritual measures things like faith, resilience to the unnatural, that kind of stuff. Faith is one that I'm still fleshing out. I just know that it needs to be a 4th category at this point. And then personal, This is stuff like the current 4 kind of sub aptitudes that I have here are verbal. So how well can you speak? How well can you tell a story? Can you lie well? Can you negotiate well? Presence, which is essentially the aura that people get off of you when you walk into a room. Magnetism, which is likability, but also how good looking are you? How charming are you? How personable are you? And then performance, which is actually doing like performative things like pantomime, disguising yourself, singing. That's kind of like your bard element of the personal. So that's what I'm looking at for characters. But beyond that, once you've assigned these dice pools, which I've got right now 4 breakdowns of how those go, which basically involve one aptitude being your absolute primary, another one being kind of a secondary, and then one being a weakness. Savant is basically all of your dice go in one attribute, and then everything else is your weakness. Jack of all trades, you kind of broadly distribute your attributes. And then double threat is basically you are really good at 2 things, and then 2 things you're not great at. So it kind of a broad spread there. But after aptitudes and after you assign your dice based on the sub aptitudes in there, then you have professions. And this is where I'm taking a little bit of influence from Palladium, but also a little bit of influence from Traveler. Because professions come with a certain amount of skill, which adds another dice to your dice pool when you roll. We'll get to that in a little bit. Professions kind of grant you broad, specialization in certain things. So I like to use the warriors as an example. You will be trained in combat. I'm going to limit that to 3 weapons. You have to pick 3 weapons that you're good at. And then if you want to individually add new weapons or, raise weapons individually, this is kind of a Beck Me thing that I'm playing with folding in there. You can add more weapons as you train, or you can train specifically in weapons and add a dice there. But, you have to spend resources to do this. That's what I like in a warrior is you've got 3 weapons. Everyone else gets 1 weapon. And some of the professions have limits on what weapons those are. So like a wizard can't get really good at using a pole arm unless they have bounced between aptitudes. So this is what I'm playing around with. It's like Malachi said about Palladium, a fusion of 2 ideas. But this gets into something else that is very important with character, and that's a sense of progression. Everyone knows the level up. Level up has become a transcendent concept. It's something that you hear talked about, not just in gaming, not just in tabletop gaming, not just in video gaming. Everyone, your grandpa knows what it means to level up at this point. They'll talk about it on like Sports Center or maybe not like your local news, but again, everyone's familiar with the concept. And that sense of progression has to be meaningful. It has to be tangible. Basically, you have to incentivize your players to go after it. I am also doing away with levels in my game. I am instead breaking professions down into expertise. And then once you become, once you take all 3, I guess there are kind of levels, but once you take all 3 levels of expertise in a general profession, you then move on into specialized professions. So you go from your basic fighter, stalker, thief, magic user, and even like my magic users are Arcanist, Elementalist, and Priest. So you've got 6 core archetypes, and then from there you break into specializations. So with a Stalker, you can go into being a Ranger or a Monster Hunter or a Bounty Hunter, depending on what game you're playing, where you are. So you have a little bit more customization in progression. The idea that I'm playing with for my progression system is a funnel of expertise that takes you towards an end goal. And that end goal is going to be something involving, in many cases, domain play, because I feel like that's a natural end goal for medieval fantasy. And even kind of just after medieval, so like Renaissance up into the Westphalian period, domain play is a very natural extension of what's going on. But if you don't want to do that, because there are some people who don't want to do that, there's other options. There's moving into kind of more specialized skills so that you are basically, by the end of it, like John Wick. You're the guy who's very, very good at certain specific things. When something goes wrong in this specific avenue, you're the guy they call in. And for players who don't like that, I have I'm playing with the idea of leaving things open so that basically if a player wants to like take a dip into every single class and they roll well enough, they can do that. So if you want to make the guy who's like dabbled in every single profession, if you want to make Conan the Barbarian, for example, a guy who starts out as a barbarian, becomes a thief, becomes a pirate, becomes a Cossack, and then becomes a mercenary leader, a warlord, and then a king, you can do that if you so desire. Or if you just want to go completely schizo with it and you want to be the wizard fighter thief, you can do it. And yeah, Rex, I'm calling it Project Skeleton for a couple reasons. One, Skulls and Bones have become a kind of core tenet of my branding. It's just kind of built up over time. So calling myself, calling it Skeleton and it being made by the creator of Rollin Bones, it seems natural. But the idea is also I want to create a strong foundation upon which gameplay can happen and something that can be fleshed out kind of with further expansions. The idea of this thing is it's a foundation, it's a core for multiple kinds of role playing to be built upon it. So it is the rule system is in and of itself a skeleton for role playing. And so that's why I'm calling it Project Skeleton as of right now. I don't know if it'll stay that way. Maybe it'll change. People that I talk to seem to like the name. I think it's an easy concept to explain. The project will probably be dropped at some point, but I don't know the skeleton system is the best name for it. Anyway, again, I'm seeing myself as 5 years away from this thing. I'm basically at the same point that MCDM was at back in January of this year, only I have not asked for $3 million. So make of that what you will. I'm glad that you are positive on the name. I like the name myself. I don't know what I would change it to if I did change it, but it's still early days. I'm ways away from actually having something that people can play. I'm hoping to have that by the end of the year. Stephen Clements, would you accept $3 million? Yes, if someone gave me $3 million right now. Here, if someone gave me $3 million right now, I would quit my day job. I would live off of that $3 million and I would fast track this project. Making Project Skeleton would become my full-time job. So, Yeah. If someone's got a spare $3 million lying around and you want to give it to some rando in Nashville, Tennessee, I'm your rando in Nashville, Tennessee. So, yeah. Anyway, that's kind of my idea for progression is you are going to be able to essentially set your own character's path. And then it's really going to be up to, do you have the gold to do what you want to do? And do you have the roles to, to be able to take on these skills? Because you do have to roll to level up. And my progression system, I am, instead of doing gold for XP, I am doing away with the concept of XP. Everything is based around, one, do you have the gold to pay someone to train you? Two, can you find someone to train you? Mercurius Lucius, gratuity for a rando in Tennessee. That is very generous of you. Thank you. I appreciate it. Honestly, I appreciate it. Thank you. All right. But yeah, I'm doing away with the concept of XP. It's really just going to come down to, can you pay someone to train you? Can you convince that someone to train you? And then can you find someone to train you? So I guess find them, convince them, pay them is the order of operations there. Because like experience points are fine as an abstraction. They're not the abstraction that I prefer. I have trouble in my home games, in just like in any game that I run, I have trouble assigning experience points. It's a calculus I can never really get right. Except for like when monsters have them assigned. And so the idea here is instead of assigning a specific experience value, like a quantifiable experience value, basically I'm assigning a bounty to every monster. So like if you kill this monster and you take parts of it into town to sell, you'll get this much gold, is how I'm like, that's my abstraction. Every monster has either treasure on them if they're the kind of monster that collects treasure, or their parts, or just kind of eliminating them takes the place of experience. Like that will grant you treasure. If you bring this number of like ghoul heads into town, not ghoul heads, that would be freaky. But like if you bring, this amount of mummy dust into town, you're going to get, this amount of money. Rex Deal, can you train yourself? And if so, is it limited to having someone else train you? Same question applies to learning from books. So there are certain things you will be able to learn from books. You can learn languages from books. You can learn spells from books if you're a spellcaster. That's kind of how I'm seeing it, is there are like small things you can learn from books, big things, like things that would grant you a level. That's the kind of thing you need a mentor for. As far as training yourself goes, again, not with the big stuff. The way I'm seeing it is if you are having to train into a profession, and maybe there can be a concept where you can train yourself slowly. Like it just takes you, essentially you double the time that your character will be in time jail. And you can train yourself if you already have one rank in this thing. That's, maybe that would be a good way to be able to train yourself. But to like gain a rank in something, to like gain that first rank, you need someone to train you. So if you're a warrior, if you're trying to make the jump from a generic class to a more specialized class, you need to go find someone to give you ranger training, or you need to go find someone who is a like military officer who's going to be able to train you in like marshaling large forces. Because as a as a trained warrior, I'm taking the approach that a fighter is a veteran. Not to get too spicy, but if you have some training in warrior, you're basically like a sergeant. So to be able to train at the level of a captain, you need to go find at least a captain, if not, a major or a colonel to train you. And then, like, if you want to be a general, you got to find another general. If you want to be, and then it gets up to like, okay, if you want to be a king, you have to essentially ingratiate yourself with a ruling line and learn the concept of statecraft. So, if you take a throne by force, like in warfare, you do what Conan did. You kill the king and you take his place. You take his crown off of his severed head. You still have to learn how to become a king. The difference there is that if you kill the previous king, all of his staff is still around. So like his vizier and his chief of staff and all that, they'll still be around. They can train you because you killed the king. So that would count in that case. But for the most part, no, you have to go find a mentor. But I do think there is room for some nuance in there where if you already have a rank, you can spend double the time that it would normally take for your character to gain another rank and train by yourself. So that, Rocky 4, go into the mountains and like train by yourself kind of thing. Although he did have a trainer with him. He had Duke with him in that movie. So, but if we get into how nerdy I can get with Rocky, then we'll be here for a while. King Yellow, yeah, I am very much thinking of it as kind of a Witcher concept of gold for monster blood, and that'll get into another kind of aspect of things that are important for role-playing games. So let's go ahead and talk about that concept. Resource management. You have to have some way to manage resources. There was I'm probably going to butcher this because this was something that Dave the Distributist was talking about a couple weeks ago on one of his podcasts. There's this joke that like engineers and mathematicians and stuff make amongst themselves, and that is you stumble upon this like abandoned cottage in the woods, and inside you find the shriveled up husk of a person and a whole bunch of canned food. And then written on the wall or written on a piece of paper next to that person's corpse, you see, I have theorized a way in which I can open any can. Step 1, assume that I have a can opener. And then everything else is blank. So, make of that what you will. You can't just assume that you have a can opener. To call back to months and months of discourse ago, you can't just assume that you have a tent. You have to track your resources. Because if you, one, don't track your resources, you can solve any problem just by assuming you have something. 2, when you track your resources, you create tension, you create drama, you create situations where stories can arise. What is the story of the 300 Spartans, if not a story about resource management? What is the scene at the beginning of the first Deadpool movie where he has to count his bullets? That's resource management. It's comedy resource management, but that's resource management. Because at some point he runs out of bullets. if you remove the concept of resource management, you remove all dramatic fodder, and you basically make every situation automatically winnable so long as someone can conceptualize in their head the tool that would solve every problem. So long as anyone can, you know, say, I have a can opener when all you have are cans. So the way that I want to do resource management is one, like I said, everything's going to be gold based. But because everything is gold based, you are going to have to make hard decisions between, do I buy more equipment? Do I, pay mercenaries, or do I go train some more? Everything becomes a part of like a singular calculus at that point. Do I improve my skills or do I improve my equipment? Do I pay for the improving the skills of my retinue, my people behind me? How do you use those resources? And then of course, like there's going to be resource tracking as far as how much can you carry, um, like how many arrows do you have, rations, that kind of stuff. That I'm still working out because I've done away with a strength score. So there's not a number attached to what your strength is anymore. So quantifying what you can carry is going to become a little bit more difficult. I'm going to have to really take that one to the drawing board. And that's why I'm saying this is a very early concept for me. I have not solved all the problems. As I talk about these things, especially on streams like this, and especially, behind the scenes with my friends, I uncover some of these problems that I have to address. So that's going to end up being a something I have to overcome. So we'll see how that happens. But encumbrance and limited ability to carry things has to exist because, again, taking that element out takes out a very potent form of dramatic tension. So the next concept, and this is, again, a very obvious one, you have to have some mechanic for conflict resolution. And this applies to combat. It also applies to skill challenges. Basically, whenever the unstoppable force meets the immovable object, you have to have some way to arbitrate that. Is it rock, paper, scissors? Is it a dice roll? You guys all know this. I've seen people, and Malachi was making allusions to this man, to Matt Colville earlier on when he talked about, will combat auto hit? No, combat will not auto hit. There are people who throw out concepts just because, okay, that's been done. We've seen what, combat looks like, where you have to roll versus a target modifier and you roll a d20. The d20 has played out. We're going to just completely chuck that because other people have done it. That's not a good reason to throw things out. Again, to get a little esoteric on you guys for a second. The automobile, as we know it, was not invented by Henry Ford. What Henry Ford did was take the innovations of multiple men that came before them, combine them together, and create the affordable automobile, the commercially viable automobile. I am not looking to replace the internal combustion engine in the same way that Henry Ford was not looking to replace the internal combustion engine. I'm looking for a better way, a different way, maybe a more fun way for that engine to operate. That's how I'm approaching this. So the D20 roll is staying. Those, the dice pool that I mentioned earlier, the dice that come from your attributes, your aptitudes, and your profession, the skills that you train in, those dice are going to be rolled alongside a D20 to resolve conflict. Anything that is done against a static object, say picking a lock, forcing a door open, climbing a wall, that's going to have some kind of target number associated with it. Again, I'm going to have to work out how that plays out. Anything that's an opposed action, a negotiation, combat, is going to be an opposed roll. So let's talk about combat for a little bit, because this is something I've given a lot of thought to. This is, in fact, the first thing that I gave a lot of thought to. My combat is going to center around active offense and active defense. So every time an attack is made, the attacker will roll, and if he's unrestrained, the defender will roll. And if the attacker's roll is higher, he is going to deal a wound. If the defender's roll is higher, he's going to parry or dodge the attack, depending on what he elects to do. So as part of that, equipment is going to play a role in how these rolls interact with each other. So if you are wearing plate armor and someone is attacking you with a longsword, you are going to get a higher bonus than if someone is attacking you with a Lucerne hammer. Because a Lucerne hammer was specifically designed to penetrate plate armor. If you are, if you have a shield and you're up against a slashing weapon, you're going to be able to deflect it. Piercing weapons are going to have different effects to slashing weapons and bludgeoning weapons. And this is to encourage people to carry multiple weapons on them to deal with multiple scenarios. Siege Engine, King Yellow, Siege Engine is influential on me. I love Castles and Crusades. I ran it for a little bit. It's a good game. It doesn't do everything that I want to do, which is, why I'm talking about making my own system now. So there's definitely an influence there. But I wanted every combat to feel like I've talked a lot about the JRPG pocket dimension and how much I hate what kind of role-playing games as they have been up until today have done to combat. Because inevitably at every single table, you've been at a table where this has happened, it turns into, I hit with my, fill in the blank. And so the image that it paints in your head is automatically step forward, swing your weapon. It looks like a game from 1992. It looks like something you'd play on the Super Nintendo. And no offense to Super Nintendo RPGs. I don't want the Final Fantasy crew jumping down my throat here. But I don't want that in a role-playing game. How do you, with this beautiful medium that we have, how do you paint these vivid pictures? You have to describe more than just, I step forward and I hit. So every combat interaction is going to involve some kind of active element, both on the part of the attacker and the defender. This will have to scale. So it's not going to be a matter of, in squad-based combat or, mass combat, you can't have it be where, a column of 50 men attack another column of 50 men and you roll the same interaction 50 times. It's going to have to scale up. It's basically going to have to be one roll every single time. Whether it's, a charge versus a, holding for a charge, however that plays out. You're going to have to keep that roll manageable as it scales up. But I want the defender to feel active, to feel, like an active participant in the battle. They have their sword, they have their shield, and instead of just, relying on the fact that your shield gives you a +2 to your AC to, paint that picture in your mind of, you bring up your shield to block the blow. I want the player to say, I bring up my shield to block the blow, and, here's my roll to bring up that shield. Or, here's my roll to parry with my sword. And even if you are successful enough in your defense. I bring up my shield to block the blow, and I come around with a side swipe with my longsword. That's what I want to create in my combat, is a sense of active resistance between both sides. Oh, we're joined by R-Dubs here. I'm here to avoid watching Griff on Moose's stream. Yeah. I understand. I'm glad you're here, R-Dubs. Welcome. Anyway, that's what I'm looking at for conflict resolution, is anything that involves two participants is going to be, opposed roles. Anything that's one participant against something static, one roll with a target number to hit. And hopefully that doesn't become something that's completely unmanageable, because that'll be that would suck to have to cut. This is every idea you come up with as a creative is like your baby. This is my baby. This is like my favorite child that I've come up with, or that I've adapted, because I didn't come up with this concept. Other people have done this before. I got this from, I believe it was Flashing Blades, is where I kind of first started thinking about this concept, reading through Flashing Blades. So that's, this is something that I hope I can make work, is what I'm trying to say. Dueling Dragon Adventures here. Welcome, Greg. In Titan D6, you gain a status called Momentum that creates a snowballing effect of attacks, but momentum can be taken from you like a wrestling match. Yeah, this is another concept that I like. Rewarding success on top of each other. I don't have a momentum mechanic like you do, but the idea that I've come up with is... it plays off of the wounds aspect. I don't have hit points in my game. I have a certain number of wounds that a character can take based on how, based on whether or not they're proficient in vigor and like how far along in their training they are, and certain other things. Again, determining what gives you a certain number of wounds is something I'm working on. But the idea is that the more damage you deal to your adversary, the less able they are to fight back. Now, that is going to snap back around to when you've taken your last wound. If you make a successful check on your vigor, you can continue standing. And that's kind of like a Savage Worlds concept of like soaking wounds. But it gives you the ability to like stand and fight, but as soon as combat's over, or as soon as you take another hit, you go down immediately. And so this idea of like the more damage you do, the more of an advantage you get an actual mechanical advantage, or rather your opponent gets a mechanical disadvantage. That's something I want to play around with. And Rex, I'm glad you agree with me on that, because this is something that a lot of people forget about, I think. There are really cool ways to defend in combat. It's not all about the attacks. Like, yes, there are flashy attacks, but if you're doing like 2-weapon fighting, the idea of like crossing your blades and catching an oncoming blade before it hits you in the head, like, that's cool. And that's an active way to defend yourself. To bring up your swords, cross them in front of you, to deflect an oncoming blade, to have something like a sword catcher, kind of an obscure Renaissance era weapon, where you literally catch someone's sword in like a notch on the back of the blade, and then you break it with the flat of your sword. I want you to be able to do stuff like that, because that's cool. It's, and that way, like, it eliminates, or hopefully it eliminates, it's not my turn, so yeah, do whatever you want to me, and then just let me know how much damage I have to write down while I'm like half looking at my phone. No, you're an active participant, whether you are taking a turn or not. You've got something that you can do. That's what I want to foster in my game. And as part of that, before I kind of move off of conflict resolution and onto different topics, my initiative system, I am stealing whole cloth from. I'm committing IP theft. I'm stealing whole cloth from Victory Games' James Bond. The idea of the winner of initiative declares their action last because they get to see everyone else, like what they're doing, essentially before it happens. That idea of like you look in a room and you can see every single person go for their gun before you go for your gun and you get to shoot first. That is cool. And that's something that I want in my game. So that Victory Games, James Bond aspect of everyone rolls initiative. The loser declares first, the winner declares last, and then the winner goes first. That's currently in Project Skeleton. King Yellow, that kind of stuff works better in dueling than all-out combat. Yes, but when you're looking at a mass combat, I see your point. When you've got like 10 or more people and you're dealing with basically like squad formations, yes, you don't want to describe every single individual cool flourish. But from everything from like dueling up through essentially dungeon combat where 5 players, or even as many as like 10 players and then some monsters, I think it won't slow things down as much as maybe it sounds like it will. At least I don't think. And again, this is what playtesting is for, so I'll be able to determine that myself. But I don't think it'll be as big a problem in kind of your average combat size. It's something that'll have to be abstracted away in mass combat, but in smaller combats, I think it'll work out fine. Now, another thing, actually, this dovetails nicely into the next essential element of role-playing games: adversaries. You have to have something for players to overcome, whether it's each other or some kind of NPC resistance or monsters to fight. Each other, by the way, is going to be built into the concept. I've had this conversation, and it got a little contentious when I brought up this idea in Basic Experts Gilded server. But there's going to be a section of the book when I talk about adventuring parties called an Alliance of Convenience. And it's going to lay out the fact that as members of this party, you are all working together essentially because if you don't, you won't survive inside a dungeon environment. Once you leave the dungeon, all bets are off. Either you have made friends with each other through overcoming an ordeal together, or you still don't trust each other. And you play it out after that. Or, you become friends and you get along and you go on multiple adventures together. That could happen. But the idea that I'm playing with is as an adventuring party, you are only together so long as you need to be together. I don't want to plant this idea that you have to be the Guardians of the Galaxy. You have to be this, motley crew of adventurers who stick together through thick and thin. I've only had one drink, if you can believe it. You're this motley crew of adventurers who have to, stick together through thick and thin. No. You can PvP if you want to. You just have to understand going in that this is a possibility. And understand that you're going to blow things up if you do that. So, if you want that kind of game, it's there. If you want to get along, you can get along. So that's going to be part of it. Devil's Theater, how big was that drink? Up to here. So kind of big, I guess. It was mostly yeah, I don't know. I don't know what it was. It's mostly tequila, I think. Unfortunately, well, fortunately, because I like tequila. You are too busy thinking about Sumerian September to talk about gaming. We all understand. Conan's mighty thews are hard to resist. It is Sumerian September for all of you who are observing. Best of luck in that. Yeah, Rex, Bronstein built into the game. That's going to be an element. Although, shame on you for committing IP theft in my chat. How dare you? Don't you know what you're doing? Don't you know that you've committed massive IP fraud against the Federal Republic of Germany for using their language without their permission? Don't worry, Dubs. That was just a joke. But yeah. So yeah, monsters. I might take some flack for this. I know I've said that multiple times tonight because of how much crap I've talked about 4E and 4E enjoyers. Specifically, one Matthew Colville. I'm thinking of incorporating the minions concept into my game. Specifically, I like the idea that for certain monsters, actually, really for all monsters, there is a lesser form that is running around, either a juvenile form or like a henchman, an underling, a minion, just like your orc grunts or your standard goblins. There's an elite, so a more specialized unit, something like archers, assassins, something like that, and then commanders or higher level monsters. And so when it comes to combat, let's say you come across a squad of orcs, or a warband of orcs, to use the proper terminology here. Most of these orcs are only going to be able to take one wound. So like when you hit them, they're down. And then you're going to have some that can take a couple wounds, and then you're going to have like one, maybe two, if it's harrowing for a small group of adventurers, that can take like 3 or more. So that's how combat's going to play out in that regard. So there's going to be a lot of cases where the orc swings its axe at the the thief. The thief sidesteps and then brings his rapier up and stabs him in the throat where there's a gap in his armor, and then that orc's down. But then it's going to be a little bit more of a back and forth between the players and the warlord. And Malachi in chat here pointing out, even amongst people who dislike 4E, minions do seem to be kind of a popular concept. It's the only place where minions are popular. Definitely not on Facebook. But yeah, I think it's a cool concept. And I also like the idea that, if a minion gets away, either a minion downs you and then runs away, or you leave a minion alive and he runs back to he can level up. I like that Nemesis system that Shadow of Mordor used. I don't want it to get out of hand. I'll have to find a way to make it not get out of hand. But I like the idea that, if you spare an adversary and you do something like really messed up, they'll remember what you did and they'll come back after you. I think stuff like that's cool. And in a zero prep style game where you're basically reliant on the emergent gameplay for content. Having recurring adversaries that are made from the actions that your players undertake, it's kind of a perpetual content machine in that way. So, you know, yeah, you can spare and redeem. You could spare someone and convince them to abandon their thieving ways. Desperado, why don't you come to your senses? That kind of stuff. Or you slaughter an entire orc's village in front of him. He gets away and he remembers that you slaughtered an entire village in front of him. Even if you had good reason to do so, he's still not going to be happy about that. So yeah, that's kind of how I'm handling monsters. Another essential element is alignment. And the way that I'm trying to do alignment, this goes along with characters. The way that I want to do alignment is, instead of declaring yourself to be good, neutral, or evil, your actions are going to inform what your actual alignment is. So things will have alignment requirements. For example, you can't be a paladin unless you are lawful good. Your goodness, your worthiness of that title and power is based on your actions. It's based on how you play things out. There'll be a system of warnings or strikes where, if you... And I also want it to be cumulative. I don't want people to be able to game this thing. I don't want people to say, okay, if three wrongs are going to make me lose my paladin powers, that gives me 2 free wrongs. No, I want it to be like, you commit your first wrong and your god takes away some aspect of your power. You commit a second and he takes away another. You commit a third and you're fallen. That's kind of how I want to do it. Is, the more that you push, the more that you really kind of get to the edge of decency, the more you're going to be in danger of losing. Especially if things are tied to your alignment. If you're a fighter, just a mundane fighter, kind of playing that alignment game isn't necessarily as bad as if you're a paladin or a cleric. You're not going to lose abilities as a fighter, but you'll lose trust and prestige with people around you, especially if you are expected to do things one way or the other. So I want alignment to be determined by player action. Because I really want alignment to mean something. And the best way for me, for it to mean something is for it to be a measured, you actually have to do good. You can't just say you're good and then do questionable things. Doing questionable things will cost you. So you have to really consider your moral decisions. That's how I want to do alignment, is individual choices do matter. And the more you stack those choices, the more you kind of pull people out of them. Yes, as Malachi says, 2 wrongs don't make a right, but 3 rights make a left. If I'm not mistaken, here's something for the youth group kids out there. If I'm not mistaken, there is a Reliant K album called 2 wrongs or 2 lefts don't make a right, but 3 do. So yeah. And again, Malachi, I'm going to have to read my Palladium Fantasy 2 ebook and see how that works. And at least I know if I release this, I'm going to have 2 customers. I'll have Wonky and I'll have Rex. So there we go. Although Wonky doesn't even count as a customer because he'll be doing art for this book whenever it comes out. So yeah, he'll be a contributor, and then we'll go from there. So that's really what I'm working with. And yeah, there are other things that go into this. When I talk about adversaries. Obviously, like, traps, puzzles kind of fall into that category. The dungeon falls in that category. Exploration is very important as well. These things all kind of come in with, the idea of there being conflict. There has to be something to play in your game to make it work. And so that's where I'm coming from on that. Now I do have, let's see, I do have one old message. This was back at the beginning of the stream. I started this. I wanted to come back to it because I said inherently a game is a simulation. One, to trigger the people who hate simulationism, but two, because it's true. Grognard TX, do complex environments require less complex rule set or rules? That's a tough one. And I'm leaning towards no. Complex environments, if there's a lot of variables that you have to account for, you have to account for those variables. That's what I think of when I think of, complex environments. Yes, you want to abstract away from needless complication, but you don't want to abstract so far that you lose mechanical depth. You basically don't want to create a situation where there's press button to win. And that's kind of where I fall on that. And this is really the problem that I have with the whole crunch versus rules light discourse. Crunch, people treat it like a zero-sum game. Too many, yes, as Rai Brahmide in chat is saying, too many defined rules bogs everything down. Yes. Too many defined rules where they don't necessarily need to be defined, where every single edge case is defined. That's too many rules. Having some room to generally arbitrate is good, but you need a game to be. This is a dumb way to put it. You need a game to be as complex as it needs to be. How crunchy should your game be? How crunchy does it need to be? How complicated is the situation you're trying to simulate? When I did that whole video where I got Professor Dungeon Master's fans mad at me for the first time, the scenarios that he was saying you could simulate with just a D6 roll are far more complicated than that. That's why I wanted Victor Gorchev to be on that panel with me, and why I was glad that he was there. Because Vic, as you all know, makes games that deal with like modern technology, modern firearm technology, that kind of stuff. When you introduce stuff like that, you're introducing layers of complexity, especially when it comes to technology. If you don't have mechanics defined enough, you create situations where you have a press button to win scenario. And nobody likes that. As much as people may say they like crunchy games, no one likes a scenario that's so simple where all you need to do is, as one of my old players said, tell a bedtime story and roll a d10 to see if it comes true. No, like that's not the way you want to do things. And games that do that are not sticky. I feel like people extol the virtues of Powered by the Apocalypse. Who do you know that routinely plays Powered by the Apocalypse? Like, really? Do you know people that get together in massive groups to play Blades in the Dark on a regular basis? No, of course not. If anything, you know people that have played it like once, maybe twice. Most of you know people like myself who have it on their shelf and have never played it. And I only have it on my shelf because I got sent a free copy by the author. So there's that. And Rye Bromide again. This isn't me telling you you're wrong. I feel the dice sort out the finer details. The die decides how slick the floor is or how easily the stalactite falls. Again, in some cases. Sometimes that's enough. Sometimes it needs to be a little bit more. And again, it depends on what you're trying to do. And so, like, yeah, I don't think you're telling me that I'm wrong here. I see what you're saying. The advice that you're giving or the feedback that you're giving here is very valuable because you don't want something that's needlessly crunchy. You want, like I said, how much crunch does your game need? Enough. It's like Rolls Royce with horsepower. How much horsepower does your car have? Enough. That's the level of crunch you need. Crunch is not the enemy. Crunch is an essential element in some cases. I'll take it a step further. Crunch is an essential element in a lot of cases. More cases than people are comfortable admitting, in fact. And that's why a lot of RPGs struggle to retain people. They don't have a good balance of mechanical complexity. So every time I talk about this, I see the mountains in front of me, and the mountains get higher. They get like 30 feet higher every time I talk about what I want to do with this game. So again, I've probably got about 5 years ahead of me working on Project Skeleton. I like I said, I'm in Matt Colville's position without the $3 million. And I have a name for my game. All right. Malachi again. No, but they do gather in big groups to play Draw Steel. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. We all know you're joking. Patty. Welcome, Patty. I'm glad that you could make it here towards the end. Devil's Theater. I've never played Fate. I know the system. I've never played it. And honestly, yeah, I don't have to tell any of you this. You guys are RPG fans. You know how many books you have on your shelf that you've never played, and you know how many books you have on your shelf that you never will play. We're all in that same boat. My goal here, is to make Project Skeleton the book that you actually break out to play, if not the one that you default to. I want to make a serious competitor here. I don't just want this to be bought by people who like me personally, because they want to have Ryan's game on their shelf. I want this to be a game that people seriously consider, and yeah, that's what I want. Okay, so it's barely a system at all. Is Fate one of those games that came out of the Forge? Because if it is, then yeah. Yeah, all of those games are barely games. Amber Diceless isn't even a game. It doesn't have dice. It's not a game. It doesn't have mechanics. So yeah. Malachi is saying that it did come out of the Forge. So yeah, Giant Lands, Michael Heatle, and Dystopian Dawn haven't actually seen play yet. I also have not played. I have not played Michael Heatle yet. I have it on my shelf. I have no excuse to not play Michael Heatle. I only know the creator. I only hang out in his Gilded server all the time. I could have played any time. But yeah, Evil Hat Games. Yeah. And unfortunately, I believe Fate Core is what powers the Dresden Files RPG too, which is really unfortunate because I love the Dresden Files. I will never play that game because it's Fate based. So there's that. And yeah, just I'm not buying anything from Evil Hat. Patty, I feel like you are in the majority of people who bought Giant Lands at that point. You bought it because it looked cool, and then found out it was controversial. But yeah, happens to us all. So yeah, guys, that is going to do it for me tonight. Yeah, that's what I've got. Yeah, there's again, this is a broad topic that I have only done an hour and 20 minutes on. You could do 3 hours on this topic and just, keep identifying things that are essential to the core of RPGs. But I feel like I have a good roadmap ahead of me. And I've gotten some interesting feedback from you guys who are participating in the live chat on, what the system could be. Um, what'll really get people excited about playing Project Skeleton, versus picking up, whatever BX with new bells and whistles is released from the OSR, or whatever square wheel Matt Colville ultimately ends up putting out, or whatever non-game Dagger Heart, is that what Darrington Press's game is called? Whatever monstrosity that is. That's I want to compete here. I want this to be something that people actually care about. And so I'm going to take my time on it, and I'm going to really refine this idea. And if someone wants to give me $3 million, then you'll have it a lot sooner than 5 years. But, again, I'm not going to start asking people for money until I've got a manuscript released. And that's going to mean play tests and drafting and more play testing and, all that stuff. So it's a long road, and I'm starting here. Yeah, Chance. Everyone wants to write their very own fantasy heartbreaker, and that's what I'm trying not to do. I'm trying not to write a heartbreaker. However, I may be the right kind of center to release some of your inner fantasies. So there you go. Maybe I am born to be a heartbreaker. Malachi, hopefully that falls into your wheelhouse of good music. Because if you don't like Pat Benatar, then I don't know. Maybe we'll have it out after this after the stream is done. But yeah, that's me for this evening. I'm glad that you guys tuned in. Glad that those of you who are here enjoyed it. I'm looking forward to talking more about this concept with you guys. And I'm also looking forward to next week on Rollin Bones, because next week I am very blessed to be joined by Timothy Brown, one of the co-creators of Dark Sun. He was a big fan of my John Watson interview when we talked a little bit about kind of the spiritual successor to Dark Sun that he and John are working on specifically for Dungeon Crawl Classics. But we're going to talk a little bit about the origins of Dark Sun, and I want to take things kind of beyond the realm of Dark Sun. You guys know me; I love it, but I do want to let Mr. Brown talk a little bit more about some of the stuff he works on outside of it, including apparently music. Apparently, he is also a musician. I didn't know that, so we'll talk about that next week. But until then, whether you rolled a 1 or a 20, I'm so glad that you rolled your bones with me, Ryan Howard. I will see you guys next week. I love all of you. Thank you so much for tuning in. This is going to be so much fun to work on with all of you out there, helping me refine these ideas.